Welcome back, everybody. We're on our final segment of this particular course. We've gone through the estimation of planetary dashas individually, what they mean through Brihat Parashar Horashastra. It's been so long ago, I believe that's what we did. We've also gone through each house, 1 through 12. This will be the 12th, from the text Sarvarta Chintamani. And this will be the last one. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to do this. I've been wanting to share these principles for a while. Again, the encouragement to get you to think like an astrologer. And the 12th house is a nice house. So let's go ahead and look at it and see if we can clear up any misconceptions about it. Sarvarta Chintamani. What's the first statement that's given? Well, it describes what is the 12th house about. Well, it deals with expenses, after death states, loss of limbs, the left eye, and one's sleep. Now expenses, planets in the 11th, aspect in the 11th, will show us, are we going to have a lot of expenses? Are they going to be expenses that are worthwhile expenses, or are they going to be more wasteful expenses? The Lord of the house in the 12th can also show us from where the expense is coming, or the planets, such as Mars, can show expenses from brothers and siblings. The son from the father, and so on. So Sarvarta Chintamani gives a lot of good insights into this. When it talks about after-death states and sleep, well, the state that you experience after death is intimately related to your deeper consciousness, those things you've not processed. You're unconscious, essentially. Just like when you go to sleep, your dreams are a representation of all those things that have not been processed, your deeper states of consciousness. So while we can look literally at the 12th as an after-death state, really it can show how well does one sleep, what is the nature of that state when they are not fully conscious, but when they're subconscious, their subliminal inclinations can percolate to the surface, which is one of the reasons why this is also associated with contemplation and the capacity to do spiritual practice as well, because the more stuff you have in the way, the less capacity you have to contemplate well. But again, learning to contemplate, actively contemplating, that leads to clarity, clarifying one's consciousness, so that the after-death state and sleep becomes more easily and enjoyable. So we have to remember this. Now let's go over some principles dealing with the 12th house. So it begins, a cruel sign in the 12th, or malefics in the 12th, or the Lord of the 12th is aspected by malefics, one's expenses are in illegitimate means. Essentially what that means is maybe you have some wasteful expenses. So you see that in the 12th, going on with the 12th Lord, maybe we need to rein in the expenses or find a way to curb our expenses. This also occurs if the 12th is occupied by Saturn, Mandi, or Rahu, or its lord is influenced by these planets, and the 12th lord is in a malefic navamsha. So again, we're looking at the lord of the house, influenced by Saturn, Mandi, or Rahu, or the house itself, the 12th house, influenced by these, and the 12th lord in a malefic navamsha, meaning in the navamsha of a cruel planet. The navamsha lord of the 12th, so now we're taking the lord of the 12th in the birth chart, we're seeing where does it go in the navamsha, and who rules over that navamsha. So the navamsha lord in the 12th, being a benefic, and placed in a benefic navamsha, and surrounded by benefics, gives expenses on legitimate means. So good expenses, expenses that are worth spending on. This is also true if Jupiter or Venus occupy the 12th, or if Mercury and Moon are there, and aspected by benefics while located in many good Vargas. Again, just like in all the previous videos, we need to tie this into how are these planets doing throughout the Vargas. The better they're doing throughout the Vargas, the more legitimate the expenses are, if you want to consider it that way. And these things are also applicable, as I've stated before, to things like prajna astrology. When someone asks me a question, is this a good investment, a good expense? And I happen to see, when I create the chart for that moment, that the 12th is occupied by Saturn or Mandi or Rahu, the 12th lord is in a malefic navamsha, that it's going to be an expense that they're not going to find worth it in the end. But if I find that when I create this chart that the Lord of the 12th is a benefic and it's placed in a benefic Navamsha, surrounded by benefics, that expense, even though it might be high, will be worth it in the end, and they'll feel that way typically. So if the Lord of the 10th is cruel and located in a Navamsha of a natural enemy or debilitation, so we find the Lord of the 10th as a cruel planet or a malefic planet, and it's located in a Navamsha of a natural enemy or its debilitation of Navamsha, and it's aspected by the 12th, one spends on unnecessary things. And the opposite will be true if the variables are reversed. So here we see the 10th coming into play here. And why the 10th? Because that's our activity in the world. Getting it plugged in with the 12th, well, that's going to be activity towards our expenses. So we see how these things fit together. Now, if the 12th Lord is weak, and or with the 6th Lord, or with Gulick, one spends to address the enemy, to deal with enemies. So what are we going to have expenses on? Well, if the 12th Lord is weak, and it's with or under the aspect of the 6th Lord, which deals with enemies, or with Gulick, one spends to address the enemy, to deal with enemies. So, again, this is something to remember both for birth chart analysis as well as things like prajna. And if I don't promote it enough, I can't help it. It's because I love the course and I love prajna. But at AstralVedicAstrology.com, under the MP3 audio and video section, downloadable courses, there is a course specifically on prajna. It's one of my favorite courses because prajna itself is actually one of my favorite kinds of astrology to do. The accuracy of it's off the charts. So try to remember everything and then eventually learn prajna and you'll be a phenomenal astrologer. So if the 12th Lord is located in malefic Navamsha and with or aspected by a weak Mars, one loses wealth on account of brothers. So here we have the 12th Lord in a cruel Navamsha and associated with a weak Mars. So that's brothers. One loses wealth on account of brothers. The same will be true with spouse. If the 12th Lord is weak in a cruel Navamsha, associated with or aspected by a weak 7th Lord, one loses wealth on account of spouse or partners. So again, we would pull this in. If someone asked me, is this a good business venture with my spouse or with a new partner, and I saw that the 12th Lord was in a cruel Navamsha, associated with or aspected by a weak 7th Lord, I'll say, no, you're probably going to lose money on this. And it would more than likely be accurate, again, because prajna is such a fascinating practice in and of itself. But this is also true with the birth chart, meaning that we have to remember that this is a Vimshottari Nakshatra Dasha course. So if you had this combination, and you were running a Dasha of the 12th Lord and a Dasha of the 7th Lord at the same time, like for example, if you were a Leo ascendant and your 12th Lord is the Moon and your 7th Lord is Saturn, during a Saturn Moon or Moon Saturn Dasha, if the 12th Lord was in a cruel Navamsha and associated or aspected by a weak 7th Lord, I would say that's the time where a person's going to lose money on account of spouse or partner. So we tie it all together in that way. And we can do this with children, with the 5th house. We can do this with the 9th house and the sun for father. We just follow the same principles, and it'll work out in the same fashion. So look at a few more combinations from Sarvarta Chintamani to finish out this particular series. And this is related to after-death states. So one is said to go to hell after death if the Lord of the 12th is in a malefic Navamsha, in a malefic sign, with a malefic planet, and is aspected by a malefic. So again, it may be that actually, literally, this person goes to hell when they die. But typically, when we're talking about after-death states, these are those subconscious states. You know, a person could be totally drunk and inebriated, and they're in that state. They could just be passed out. They could be asleep in deep sleep. And it'll show what is the influence of their deeper unconscious. And again, things like meditation, spiritual practice, anything that gets down in there and clears out the unconscious can help to mitigate malefic influences to the 12th. Now, we don't want to get into the Drekana. There are some comments here on the Drekana. I'll go ahead and post that on the blog post for the 12th house on my website. You can read that on your own. But again, we see Sarvarta Chintamani talking about another Varga, not just the Navamsha, but the Drekana as an important consideration for influences on a house. So our final, we'll do two more. We talked about going to hell after death. Well, here's another one. This also occurs if the 12th house is occupied by Rahu and Mandi and is aspected by the Lord of the 8th or the 6th. Or if the 12th house occupies a malefic Shashtiamsha and is aspected by malefics. So all these things come together, that'll be serious hell after death. If a few of them come together, minor hells. But one more time, if the 12th is occupied by Rahu and the shadow planet Mandi, the Upagraha Mandi, and is aspected by the Lord of the 8th or the 6th. So we have to have Rahu and Mandi in the 12th and an aspect from the Lord of the 8th or the 6th. Or if the 12th house occupies a malefic Shashtiamsha and is aspected by malefics. And the Shashtiamsha is the 60th divisional chart. So maybe we'll do some videos on how to work with the Shashtiamsha here soon. But really we have to learn how to read the chart first before we can get into that. There's one more comment here, because if the opposite is true, meaning there are benefic planets, gentle planets impacting that 12th, well, that shows going to heavenly realms after death. So remember, just because there are statements that are negative doesn't mean that's it. If you reverse those statements, it will reverse the experience. So most of these astrological books can't share every possible combination because they're assuming you can actually think about the opposite way and come up with the proper result in that situation. All right, so now we're going to talk about the heaven or hell after death state and in regards to what degree. One of the things that it's stated is that if the Lord of the 12th is located in its highest degree of exaltation and is aspected by the Lord of the 9th house, the person goes to heavenly realms. It will also show a person sleeping well, having a bed with precious jewels and precious stones, and opulence in their bedroom, essentially. So when we're considering this, good planets impacting the 12th, the better the dignity, the higher the realm, or the better the sleep, or things of this nature. Malefic planets aspecting the 12th, or impacting the 12th, well, the better the dignity, it's still going to be a hell-like realm, but it's going to be a higher hell-like realm, if you want to think about it that way. And one of the more fascinating things that Sarvarta Chintamani goes into, which is similar to the Ishtadevata portion of Jaimini Sutras, is that by looking at influences on the 5th house, one will see the kind of deity one worships, or the Ishtadevata. So it's fascinating that at the end of the chapter on the 12th, there's a portion on the 5th house related to the kind of worship one will do. We're not going to get into that in this video, but if you would like to learn more about that, again, go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, find the blog post related to the Vimshottari Nakshatra Dasha course, the 12th house, and there'll be a whole list there of all the principles we've covered today, as well as more principles that we weren't able to get into due to time. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for staying the course with this particular series. Now what's left? Well, we'll continue on with our semesters of teaching. Next up we'll have the Bhava and Houses class, open to about 30 students. You can learn more about that under the events page at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com. We'll continue with YouTube videos, looking at combinations of planets, as well as continuing an exploration of Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra as a master text in understanding how to properly assess an astrological chart, as well as to qualify it for specific trends and tendencies to really dial it in. All right, so be well. It was a pleasure, and we'll be in touch soon. Peace.